Super Casual Podcast with Nicholas de Santo.
So yeah, tell me more about you. Like, where did you grow up? Where your parents from and all that. And where in Italy were you?
Yeah, sure. I was born in Rome. My parents were from Iran, so I grew up initially in Rome, but I did my high school in Iran because my father, and this maybe we get into the therapy part too early. My my father had the brilliant decision or idea to take us back to Iran at the time of the longest war of the 20th century, when everybody was escaping. So yes, I spent my high school years in Iran, and then I returned to Italy.
Oh, wow.
I,
Wait, which war is that?
this was the Iran-Iraq war, so it lasted about 8 years. It was a what the experts call a war of attrition, which means nobody can really defeat the other side
Stalemate?
decisively. So it goes on for a long time. Yeah, 8 years. So it has the unenviable tagline of the 20th century's longest war. I
Oh.
mean, apart from the Cold War, but the Cold War was cold. This one was pretty much hot. Yeah.
Wow. And how did that impact you? Like, how did that shape your character or your political views or anything like that?
Well, I can't be too much of a victim because it's a big country and we were not close to the front. So it's not something that well, there were bombardments at times, but not all the time.
Hmm.
There was rationed food. So in a way, I feel a bit old because when I'm here, because when you are in Europe and Europeans, when they talk about rationed foods, it's like the grandparents talking about it or
Yeah.
the bombardments. And this kind of impacted my Italian identity, if you like, because Italians complain about food a lot,
Yeah.
and I don't.
Oh.
I want to complain. I remember that, at least this is food. Italians, they go everywhere. Like, we went to Prague. What did you eat? That's the first question. And the food is always terrible. Of course, it's terrible because you're outside
Yeah.
Italy.
And I
It
into
is supposed
yeah.
to be terrible. You don't go to Prague or to Japan for the food. It's going to be terrible.
Well, well, from an Italian perspective, my ex is Italian, so I kind of get
So
it.
you know, right? Yeah, food is important, and it is important, but I can't complain because of that part of my background. So maybe it helps. Maybe I'm a bit less obnoxious at the table. But
And
but of course, that doesn't mean I approve of pineapple on pizza or ketchup on spaghetti and all that.
you're still Italian enough.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a bit of decency,
And
sure.
where's your wife from?
Austria.
Austria. Wow,
Yeah.
out of all those places. Well, of course, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they are neighbors, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And when did you move to the UK?
I moved to the UK about 15 years ago in
Okay.
2009. I found a job with BBC World Service,
Mm-hmm.
so I started working for them, and then I started doing a bit of stand-up on the side, and they said this is a reputational damage for us. You telling jokes in a pub basement.
Yeah.
We have quite a few pedophile news presenters, but you are the problem, Nicholas,
You must be
uh, for
eradicated.
our image. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's when I left.
I see. And how is it to be a right-wing comedian and also, you're on the news sometimes, like while you're
Mhm.
an immigrant yourself?
I mean, it's great. Well, first of all, I haven't been arrested because the British government is still trying to figure out my ethnicity. White enough to be Italian, not white enough to be arrested by the UK police. And that's a pretty sweet
Sweet.
spot to be in. And of course, being a right-wing comic is great because I'm not a good comedian, so I don't want competition. So it's basically me and two or three friends of mine. We are pretty much in demand.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
what's your thoughts on Trump?
I generally like him.
You generally,
He's Yeah, he's not as right-wing as I want him to be, but yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
have a lot of pro-Trump material. I mean, he doesn't have to get everything right, but nobody does, right? Um, but yeah, happy days. I mean, you haven't. Some people say the day my child was born was the most beautiful, the most exciting day of my life. These people haven't worked in a BBC newsroom in 2016 when Trump won. All right. That is where you want to be, and that is the joy that I will cherish for the rest of my life. All right. There's nothing is comparable to that.
Wow, like were you the only one cheering? Like what was it like?
Yeah, it was like it was cathartic. It was fantastic. Everybody was well. They claim to be impartial, but they are not. And if you've lived and worked among them, you know they aren't. And of course, it was so sweet. We had waited so much for that, and Brexit, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How
and
Brexit working out?
2020. Brexit is working out actually okay, because well, for so much talk about democracy, because if you listen to the woke and the lefties, democracy is always in danger. But guess what? They held this referendum because they thought they would win it and they would, put the issue to bed forever.
Mhm.
So they held the referendum and they lost. And then they said, "Hey, let's have a people's vote now." I said, "We had the people's vote. It's called referendum. It's a Latin word. Doesn't mean it's not a people's vote. What are you talking about?" So they wanted to do it again, and then they started sabotaging it, right? They
When you say they,
sabotaged it.
who do you mean?
Who do I mean? Well, everywhere. First of all, the government in charge, because even part of the Conservative Party didn't want it. In fact, the Conservative Prime Minister at that time, David Cameron, he made this mess. So basically, David Cameron allowed a referendum for the Scottish independence, and independence didn't win. So he thought, okay, that issue is put to bed. Now let's solve this other issue because he was under pressure from Nigel Farage, UKIP, UK Independence Party, and some fringes, some hardline fringes of his own Conservative Party. But the main body, the establishment of even the Conservative Party was in favor of staying in the EU. So they were the so-called Remainers. They
Hmm.
were not in favor of Brexit. And they openly said so. They said, we are giving you the referendum, but the British government, they sent a booklet to every voter in glossy paper paid by the taxpayers saying why the British government believes that we must stay in the EU. And of course, the opposition party, the Labour Party, believed we had to stay in the EU, most of them at least. The Liberal Democratic Party, which was a third party as well, Barack Obama came here and he said, I'm telling you, you got to stay in the EU. Otherwise, if you want to do business with the US, you got to go to the end of the queue."
Is that your Obama impression?
Well, it's a first, so I hope this doesn't affect your channel negatively. I don't do many impressions, but so multinationals, of course, because they want globalism, right? They want no borders, less bureaucracy, and lower wages, and that's what the European Union has become about. Now, I don't want to turn this into a debate about the European Union, but essentially, big business, not to mention the government, which I just mentioned, but was in favor of staying in the EU because border means a bit of paperwork, means you don't get cheap labor as easily as you expected. And that's why pretty much everybody, was in favor of uh, Britain staying. And they lost just the same. And then the day after they lost, they started sabotaging. And so we had a government who had to execute the will of the people, but the government, in the person of Prime Minister Theresa May, was in favor of remaining in the EU. I mean, she had before the referendum. So imagine the irony that Theresa May, who had now taken David Cameron's place, had campaigned in favor of remaining, and now she was the prime minister who was supposed to get us out. So it a very grueling, tedious project or process started, and the Remainers, which now we had branded them Remoaners because they kept moaning about it, tried at every juncture to sabotage this process, because it's like a divorce. It can be
Yeah.
messy, it can
And,
be
and if
amicable.
yeah, so it seems like even as an immigrant yourself, you seem to be really, ingrained in the British political scene.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, because that is the ultimate racism, isn't it? Because I think you are an immigrant, so you have to vote for the left,
Mm.
right? So they take you for granted and they're surprised that you are not with them. Because again, this is the ultimate form of pigeonholing or racism. So you judge me based on my parents' background or based on the color of my skin. You are kind of brown, so you must be one of us, right? It doesn't work like that. And again, you see this in America as well. You see this in America, like you have Hispanics, but you have Hispanics who are from Cuba in Florida, and they know what communism is about, and they are Republican. You might have other Hispanics, not all of them, but they rely on benefits and open borders. They might vote for the Democrats. And again, you have Asians in America
Or
who
like
might be,
hardcore, Republicans.
yeah, because they are successful business owners. I don't know, the Koreans, the Chinese, the Japanese. So you know that. So my point is, but just to end the question, and I won't dwell too much on that. But now we are in the midst of tariff wars, and the UK, being independent or almost independent, has secured a relatively favorable tariff deal or trade deal with Trump, whereas the EU
Mm.
is still struggling. And of course, the EU is a bloc of 27 countries, and no country can go their own way. So this is just one example of showing you that, Brexit in a way
Yeah.
uh, has worked. Of
Mm.
course, there are other problems uh, in terms of immigration. Um, for example, again, we are run by a left-wing globalist government right now. The idea was we want to have control of our borders. And now, because we are out of the EU, it's more difficult for EU citizens to come to the UK. But the government is going to India or other far places to bring people from there, and not always with very good requirements. So the question is, why are we doing this? Because if we have to bring in immigrants, and that's a big if. But if we have to do that, I personally would take someone from Poland or Germany or Italy who is more aligned with our values and lifestyle than someone maybe from India or Pakistan or Somalia or elsewhere. So that is a bit ironic. But again, it's about a government that is not respecting the will of its people.
It's interesting because, I obviously, like, I don't agree with everything that you believe in, obviously, but I think what I cherish the most about you is in comedy. There's no limit on, like, because what I'm against is wokeism, is cancel culture, is you gotta think this way, otherwise you're canceled. So I think even
Yeah.
though I see eye to eye with you in other things, but I just feel like it's so valuable what you represent, and I
Thank
love.
you.
Yeah.
I've had friends or comedy promoters like that. They say, I'm a liberal, a lefty, but I want you to be there because to be in the lineup, I mean, um, because these people, you hear so much about diversity, but at the end of the day, their diversity is only superficial. Okay, so we have two girls and one Asian and one disabled and one autistic and two blacks, and it's all about that. But as soon as it comes to a diverging set of opinions, cancel culture kicks in.
Yeah, and to me that's scary because I'm from China where we had the Cultural Revolution for like 10-ish years and then millions, I don't know, I won't say too much about it, but just like there's a strong repercussion of when you try to control the thoughts, when you only allow one opinion.
Absolutely, I 100%. So of course I have the Iranian knowledge and background. I mentioned the Cubans example. Again, ironically, today in the EU, you see that Eastern Europeans uh, are more resisting and more reluctant to take these orders from above, from Brussels or immigration, for example, because the shadow of communism is still remembered and felt. So again, this is a kind of sweet irony because this globalist project of the EU tried and still tries to expand as much as possible. And I think they did overstretch, and they are not even stopping at that now. They want to bring in Ukraine, Moldova, you know. But ironically, these new members can actually prove the downfall of the globalist project because their people have been brainwashed less. They've had less time to brainwash them. Whereas if you look at Western Europe, college kids, high school students, years and years, decades of you know brainwashing and institutional wokeism at school, at university, comedy circuit, TV, legacy media, and Hollywood. So their minds are poisoned. Whereas people in Poland, people in Hungary, people in
Insane.
Slovakia, they are still kind of immune, which they might prove to be our ultimate hope eventually.
Yeah, because like in the UK now you guys have the thought police or something like that, right? Which is scary. Like, holy
It's
fuck.
crazy. And in UK, I mean, it's so fitting that George Orwell was from here, and I
Mm.
mean, it's Orwell must be turning in his grave, and he was a lefty, by the way, as far as I know. Uh, yeah, they arrest and they've just implemented this so-called Online Safety Act. They say it's to protect the children, but I have my doubts because when you have a government who jails people for silently praying outside abortion clinics, jails a mother, she's now in jail for reposting or retweeting something against immigration. They knock on old people's doors about their Facebook posts, and it's just messed up. And then when they bring in a government a law to control the online environment even more, now there's even talk of them trying to the Labour government trying to ban VPNs, which that would be interesting to see
Wow.
because I
Did
think there's
China
only
become China?
yeah. I mean, I was joking the other day on X. I said, yeah, it looks like living in Iran, except that we have fewer mosques in Iran than in the UK.
And are you worried about any repercussions? I don't know, like, are you afraid of the, I don't know, like, I don't know much about Iranian politics. Like, are you afraid of any authorities catching you someday?
Well, nowadays I'm more afraid of the British authorities. But I don't know. You live with some degree of concern or wariness. Uh, but at the end of the day, you gotta do what you gotta do. Somebody has got to do it. I didn't. I mean, I'm no longer with BBC Persian because BBC Persian was targeted by the Iranian regime because I joined them because I thought this is the voice of Western liberal values, but then I realized this is just a propaganda machine telling people that there are 55 genders and 62 sexual orientations, and eating bugs will heal the planet and all that nonsense. So, but yeah, so I was blacklisted by them, mm,
Listen about whom?
uh, by the Iranian regime.
Okay.
Everybody who has worked for the BBC has been blacklisted by them.
Okay.
So I can't go back to Iran. I can't visit my family. But yeah, this is quite common,
Mm.
and I wouldn't do that. In fact, I have a routine called "Don't Go to Hellholes." Um, it has more than 100,000 views on YouTube. It's about the story of another Iranian British citizen who went to Iran and got in trouble. So I strongly advise against
Okay.
traveling to that place.
Do you love Iran? Do you love your heritage?
Yeah, within reason. It's it's just sad because by the time the revolution happened in 1979, and basically the what became the Islamic Revolution. So it turned the most promising and the most advanced nation in that region into a cesspit of terror and terrorism and misery, and that has been like that for the past 46 years or so.
So it
So
really
this was
push the culture backwards. Like women have to be more conservative and
yeah. I mean, obviously the culture was always there because they didn't invent the culture. I mean, some proud Iranians might try to, you know, maybe sugarcoat it and say this is not our real identity. But identity has layers, right? Identity, there is an Islamic component, but there is also a Persian pre-Islamic component, and depending at I studied national identity at Birkbeck College in London. So uh, countries or governments can resort and decide to highlight or emphasize certain elements of the culture at the expense of other elements of the culture. And it can be good, it can be necessary. It's not necessarily bad. But what happened was that there was a backlash. So we had a modernizing, westernizing monarchy who was trying to talk some sense into some of these, reactionary forces. But then you had this very unholy and vicious alliance between uh, Islamists and communists, leftists, what we call, or what the last king himself called, the black and red reactionaries. So the Islamists, and don't forget, Iran had a very long border with the Soviet Union. It had a huge communist party, outlawed but very much active. So these nefarious forces joined hands for different reasons, but they had one common enemy, the West and imperialism and America and Israel, and they did what they did, and the rest is history. And then imagine my heartbreak when I escape back to my place of birth, Europe, and I see the same thing is happening. Feminists who like Islam and lefties who want more Muslim immigration into Europe.
so hold
It's
on.
just
So
it's just mad. It's the same movie. I've already watched this movie and I know how it ends.
and what's your thoughts on like Israel Palestine situation?
No easy questions today, huh? Uh, I think, well, I mean, if you've looked at my recent routines, I joke a lot about it. But yeah, by and large, I stand with Israel, and this might cause some disappointment, maybe among some of my fans or some of my friends, because there are right-wingers who think the U.S. is too involved, is too supportive of Israel, and we shouldn't get involved, or the West shouldn't get involved. But at the end of the day, um, it's no other country would tolerate such a situation.
But
So,
but isn't, based on my research, I feel like, the since the First World War, the Ottoman Empire, British, France, Palestine, and then UN partition, the like all of that was without consulting the locals, and the League of Nations, they were heavily influenced by, European American interests. So I feel like there's that historical injustice against the Palestinians there. And and then even when the Security Council was like, oh, Israel, you should pull back, you should leave West Bank, you should leave the places you're occupied by force, they ignored it. And so based on all of those evidence, isn't it injustice for Israel to continue the expansion?
well, I mean, the very short answer is no, or not exactly. Obviously, it's a complicated issue, and this doesn't mean when I say no and when I say I'm with Israel on this, I don't mean everything that Israel has done or is doing is great. Uh, and I don't mean that the Palestinians or some Palestinians haven't suffered or haven't been unfortunate. None of that. But there are some misconceptions here. Uh, yes, the French and the British inherited a huge amount of land from the Ottoman Empire, and they had to divide it into mandates,
Mhm.
which they did. And that's how Iraq was born, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and eventually Israel, Saudi Arabia, you might say. Um, and maybe they didn't do a perfect job, but who has? I mean, which other country has been in their place? It's not easy. You get out of a devastating war and suddenly not only have you got to manage your own broke nations, but also you have to create new nations. And again, the partition of India and Pakistan. I joke a lot. I say Pakistan was the worst British invention, right? But again, who else has done it? It has. They did it with the best of intentions. I give them the benefit of doubt, and it wasn't exactly perfect, but these are very unique situations. Now, Israel was born, but Israel was born based on a 1948 or maybe 1947 resolution of the United Nations. And that same resolution provided for the creation of an Arab state. It didn't mention Palestinian because there was no such thing as a Palestinian. I know this is very controversial, but yes, the territory was called the British Mandate of Palestine, but that doesn't create a nation of Palestinians because
I know,
Palestine included Jews as well, and a name doesn't give you nationhood. But yeah, sorry, you wanted to say something?
I know when they divided the line to 55% to Israel, 45 to I
Hmm.
guess Palestine, they didn't accept it because it wasn't. It was it was largely disproportionate to what they had in the.
Of course, they didn't accept it, and the day Israel declared its existence, based on a United Nations resolution, by the way, Arab states attacked it because they didn't want a state of Israel to be created,
Yeah,
right? What I'm saying is that UN resolution provided for more land for the future Arab state. You might want to call it Palestine. They want to call it Palestine now, but there was more land in that for the Arabs or Palestinians than they claim today, right? So had they gone with it
that's
rather than trying to destroy the Jewish state, they would have been better off. And of course, decades of now maybe it wasn't the perfect partition, but again, when we now I want to speak as an Italian. When Italy lost the Second World War, we had to cede some territory to Yugoslavia. And of course, this was hard for us because, first of all, you could have argued that Italy switched sides halfway. So we did our part to help the Allies um, for whatever reason. And then we had to give some territory to what became the communist state of Yugoslavia, and they expelled many Italians. Well, they massacred many Italians. They carried out a policy of ethnic cleansing, and yes, we lost land. We lost land which was ethnically Italian. Well, there was a mix of population. Some territories were more Italian, some territories were more Slavic. But the Venetian Republic and all that. What the hell is Yugoslavia? When was Yugoslavia created? I mean, who has more history here? But what the Italian government did not do was to use this or to use these refugees, settle them in tents for decades to emotionally blackmail the enemy or the world or teach them hate or resort to terrorism. Just as an example, what has happened to the Palestinians, and this is not Israel's fault, is that look at Yasser Arafat's family and his daughter, his relatives. They're worth millions, if not more, of dollars in humanitarian aid and Western taxpayers' money, essentially. So there's been corruption, there's been terrorism, there's been hate, and there's been a very obstinate, stubborn policy of wanting everything and as a result getting nothing. So to put it briefly, yes, Palestinians have suffered, Israelis have suffered too, and it has been unfortunate that the ruling class of the Palestinians have been corrupt and inept, incompetent, and here we are. And at some point, again, this is not a position of Israel from now on. Maybe up until now, it was very similar to the position of Israel. But at some point, other Arab states thought, you know what, we are tired of this because we want to make peace with Israel, but Israel cannot make peace with these Palestinians because the Palestinians within themselves, they can't reach an agreement. So obviously you have West Bank under the rule of the Palestinian Authority, or the old PLO, and you have Gaza under the rule of Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. So at some point, United Arab Emirates, I mean, Jordan and Egypt had done it long ago, then Morocco, United Arab Emirates, and there were even talks or rumors of Saudi Arabia joining the peace deals. And this was Trump's achievement, again, speaking of Trump. And that's when the Iranians tried to stoke the fire and they financed Hamas and said, okay, do something dramatic to sabotage this rapprochement of more Arab states towards Israel. So what I'm saying is that even Arab Muslim brothers of Palestinians at some point thought, guys, if you can't get your act together, we are not going to allow the Palestinian issue to be an obstacle on the way to peace and cooperation in the region forever.
Is that why Egypt hasn't, allowed the March of Peace or something, to enter into the area?
Yeah, that's the thing, because they have seen the impact of Palestinians in Lebanon, right? Lebanon was dragged into a more than a decade of brother-killing civil war because a significant component of Palestinians settled there, started fighting against Israel, caused tension. So yes, they have their reasons. Many Palestinians lived in Kuwait, and when in the early 90s, when Saddam, Iraq, invaded Kuwait, they sided with Saddam because Saddam also threw some missiles at Israel, you know. So the Kuwaitis, once they took their country back, they kicked them out. Now, I'm not saying all Palestinians are like that or they all deserve to be, you know, refugees forever, but I'm saying that if you wanted to play Israel's advocate, the Israelis might want to say, okay, you want peace talks, but who am I negotiating with? A bunch of thieves and kleptocrats in the West Bank and a bunch of terrorists in Gaza. And ironically, the terrorists in Gaza have been democratically elected by the people of Gaza. So yeah, it's tricky.
I feel like it's so important to learn different perspectives, on the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's a slight change of topic. I know we're going heavily on the very sensitive topics. Da-da-da. Did you have a happy childhood?
So this is the free therapy part, right?
Wait, it's interwoven.
Yeah, I would say so. Um, yeah, I can't really complain because initially I was in Italy where I was born, and I always I say, if you think you're Italian all your life and one day you discover that you are not Italian, it's not a good day, is it? It's a very bad day.
Yeah.
But like, kind of looked the part and spoke the language and all that.
You're like white
But
enough to pass as Italian, right? But just something
yeah,
is off.
because pardon me?
Just like something is off.
Yeah, yeah. At some point, this is a big debate nowadays in England because we have politicians like our former Prime Minister from the Conservative Party, Rishi Sunak. He's of course Indian, British Indian, but yes. Or the head of the Conservative Party is a black woman now, Kemi Badenoch, or Badenoch. And there is this debate. Okay, these are conservative. Maybe they speak like native Brits, but are they Brits or not? And this was a fierce debate, at least on on X. Where else? And maybe I have a controversial view here. Surprise, surprise. And I don't think they can be considered as English. And I don't mean it in a disparaging way, but part of assimilating is in the root of the word. Part of assimilating is to look similar,
Mm.
right? So if you don't look the part, you can be a British citizen, as I myself am. So I think my kids can be English, and it breaks my heart when she says she's English because I want her to be Italian.
But
But she looks the part.
why can't your kids be English?
They can. They
Why can't
can because
can?
they not only were they born and being raised in Britain, in England, and they speak English like an English person, but also they look the part. So I think you can look the part. So I think I was lucky to look the part
What do you mean
in Italy,
look up?
not in England.
Like you
Yeah,
mean
I don't,
similarly?
I can't be English, but I can be Italian because I can pass
You can
on
pass.
a good day.
Oh, good day.
Yeah.
Good day. Yeah.
So so yeah, childhood was okay. As I said,
Yeah.
what can
You,
I say?
like, were you ever bullied, picked on?
Um, no. No. Again, this is because I could go, when my father was a diplomat in Rome, so I wouldn't go to a bad school. And then when he moved to Iran, when we all moved back to Iran, because of his good salary and his savings in a country now devastated by a revolution and the longest war of the century, he could buy a nice apartment in a nice neighborhood.
Mhm.
And um, quite modestly, I was also smart enough to get accepted into a good high school, which was a big deal, right? So everybody was focused on becoming a doctor or an engineer and getting the hell out of Iran and to the West. And I was wondering, I was in the West. Why am I struggling with you guys to go to the West? What happened here? So so yeah, no bullying. So if you think my comedy is mean because I was bullied, no.
So, and what's your like inner demon like? Like what's the personal psychological material that you work with? Like we all have that, right?
My inner demon.
Yeah.
I I don't know. I like Israel, so is that demon enough? That might do it for some people. I just I just think if I got the question right, I just don't like to be to look back and be regretful of something that I could have done and I didn't do. So I think in a way, comedy for me has been uh, helpful in that, people say you do comedy instead of therapy, and usually, oh, my dad didn't love me, so I'm doing comedy and that kind of stuff. But um, when I started comedy, I didn't intend to become necessarily a conservative comic or a right-wing comic. It was always on the cards because that's who I was, right? It wasn't just the marketing
Hmm.
um, ploy
Yeah.
because I just told you about my personal history, and you can't get away from your personal history. But uh, very early on, there was this backlash with the cancel culture, and I wasn't even nobody to be canceled because there wasn't much to be canceled. It was just about not having access even to your favorite open mic, you
Before
know.
you watch,
Uh, Pardon?
like you,
But
you
no, I don't want to watch that open mic. I want to perform. But there was this place I really liked it. It was in Crouch End, North London, not far from where I live, and it was a good open mic. It was ticketed for the audience, but we were not paid. And I did well a couple of times, and I did a few anti-abortion jokes, and somebody complained,
Mhm.
uh, and I got banned indefinitely. But that wasn't the worst. We did the politics. This was 2017, so this was the height of TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome, in London, right? So we had this politics night, and uh, I have an Irish friend, comedian, Cahal O'Riordan. He told me, "You went to the politics night, Nico. Politics night in London means leftist politics night." But anyway, so I go there. The night turns into my roast, and it was just an open mic here. That didn't matter. But they come up with my day job, which was the BBC. They posted disciplinary action. So these kind of incidents, at some point, I said, "Damn it, I might as well, do it," because
They made you.
you
They
want.
made you who you are.
Yeah, I mean, it was who I was because I was what I was. I wasn't. I was, you know, high school in Iran and then university in Bologna, the red heart of the Italian Communist Party, the birthplace of the biggest Communist Party of the Western world, Italy. So I graduated from there. So there was so much anger and hatred in me already. But then I thought, look, and I hate traveling on public transport. Who doesn't in London? The weather. I thought I might as well do something useful because what are the chances that I become another good comic who talks about airline food and Tinder and I admire them because when they do it well. But what are the chances? Because we already have or have had Jerry Seinfeld or Brian Regan or very good comics, Michael McIntyre here, who do observational everyday life, commercial mainstream. But if I'm doing this, risking my day job or
If
working for peanuts, next to no money, taking time away from my kids, I might as well do something that that is socially useful. So maybe years now, speaking about the demons, I think I like the idea that even when I'm gone, hopefully people will watch my videos and say, "Oh, this guy was telling it as it is
mm,
in England, in London, in those woke crazy years." So yeah, I mean, if you can't cure a disease or invent something, you might as well do something
yeah,
that creates a legacy or inspires people. And in a way, it has worked in that I get messages from all over the world, and people are inspired and say, "Oh, I'm glad somebody is saying this. Come to Australia, come to Brazil, come to India." So I get some recognition, which is very flattering also. So it's also a bit of a vindication. I mean, ironically, it's hard for me to get stage time in London,
mm,
but I get invitations from overseas, so I go there.
yeah, yeah. That's interesting.
Well, I don't know if that was what you meant by demons.
It was an open question, up to interpretation.
Okay.
And on abortion, so like
Mhm.
yesterday I bumped into a really nice Christian girl from America, and we were talking about like what about if it's like a baby from incest and rape, like,
Mhm.
and then she said that two wrong doesn't make it right. Like there was a wrong of the crime, and then if you abort, that's another wrong. And as a woman, I feel like I'm more like pro-choice. I don't want another person, any government entity to dictate my own future. But in the meanwhile, I also have affection to just all beings, I guess, if beings including the one that lived through me or would live through me. So what's your thoughts on incest abortion resulted abortion, and what's your thoughts on like as a man, like you having an opinion about it at all?
Mhm. Yeah, very good questions. A bunch of questions. First of all, so I did this essentially pro-life or anti-abortion routine, which maybe a lot of, not that I'm super famous now or anything, but a lot of recognition and gratification and attention that I got was because of that video, which made about a million, reached about more than a million views, and I got invitations from pro-life organizations. Like next April, I'll be in Michigan, for example, for one of those organizations to speak or to perform. I need to get the details right, but so I did that, and I did that on the back of the Irish abortion referendum, which passed, and it really um,
But
kind of shocked me or moved me because I was watching these beautiful, essentially young women cheering in this square in Dublin or somewhere. And usually when we want to be a bit mean to the pro-choicers, we say, "Oh, these are people who are fat or women who nobody wants to have sex with anyways, and now they want abortion." But that's not what I saw on my TV screen that day, right? I think uh, two things. First of all, when I have a pro-life routine, it doesn't mean that I am necessarily discounting all arguments or circumstances of the other side. In theory, it's not the case, but in theory, I could even be more in the middle. I'm not. Okay, I am pro-life, but a comedy routine can also have the function of raising a different viewpoint, make you think. I mean, first and foremost, it should make you laugh, and hopefully it does that. I hope it does that. I mean, the crowd was laughing there at least, but I'm saying not everything is 100% true, and you don't always you play an act,
Yeah.
right? So, but my point is that you raise a point of view and you say, hey, how about this point of view, or how about the reasons of this side? Okay, so there's that. But again, full disclosure, I am essentially pro-life. But the points that you raised, I think these are legitimate questions, but sometimes some people raise them not in good faith. Because as soon as you talk about the sanctity of life or abortion or, uh, being against abortion, they say, oh, but what about incest or what about rape? But statistically, how many of these abortions are carried out? If I go to a random abortion clinic in London, or you go to one in Barcelona, and there are 10 women in the line,
Yeah.
how many of those are there because they've had an incest or rape? So this is a
But what about that? Like, how about in that particular situation? Then what should?
okay. Well, I'll give you the answer soon. I think in that situation, you can put up the child for adoption. And again, you can decide. Okay, how far are we in this pregnancy? Okay, because when I was young, the idea or the question was, okay, at what age or at what time this fetus,
As a human.
whatever we want to call it, is a human. And religiously, medically, when is the heartbeat? When is the brain function? When does it have sensorial capacity? When does it have fingers? When does it have fingernails? When does it have a spirit,
Mhm.
right? Or soul? Okay. So that was the debate when I was young, which wasn't ages ago, right? But then they shifted the debate, or they shifted the goalpost, and it became a question of my body, my choice. And of course, the result of that crazy logic is that now, just a few weeks ago, in Britain, we have decriminalized abortion up to the moment of birth. And this is also the official position of the Democratic Party in America. It's no longer a French. It's not just a bunch of men. This happened in Minnesota, and they changed the law. And the governor of Minnesota, who would have been the VP of Kamala Harris, was in favor of that. So if medically they could, and they can sometimes, kill the baby up to the moment of birth, not just up to the moment of birth, but even after birth. And they did that in Minnesota, and they changed the law so that sometimes, imagine the madness and the horror and the disgust. They go for an abortion, but the abortion is so late that by mistake the baby is born alive, and even then they want to kill it. And this is the legislation in Minnesota, okay? It's not a fantasy. So that's the result of my body, my choice. And you want to talk about this, and they tell you, oh, what about the incest? What about it? Show me the victim of incest, and we will talk about it. But how many do we have? Again, to answer your question, incest or rape, uh, if it's 2 days ago or a week ago, maybe an abortion. I'm not sure where I stand on it exactly, but that's not exactly the point. The point is that they want to mystify that, or
Mm.
they want to just resort to this emotionally charged case of rape and incest to create to hide the real agenda. And what is the real agenda? That I want to have free, irresponsible sex, and then use abortion instead of a contraception, ideally at taxpayers' pocket, out of taxpayers' pocket. So this is what we are talking about. So anybody who says no, this is about incest or those, so you cannot argue or debate the very rare extreme cases, ignoring or discounting the main agenda, which is what I just said.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like as you were talking, I feel sad both for the hypothetical baby that's, already about to be born. And I also feel sad for the cases where, because I volunteered at the shelter where there was like a rape and incest, victims, kid. And so I feel sad for those women as well, that they will be.
Yeah, I mean, of course, and again, you speak of being sad, and this is sometimes again another argument or another tactic. Maybe they do it in good faith, but not everybody. I just don't want to judge the intent. But they say, okay, but do you feel any empathy for the mother who is going through this terrible decision, this heartbreak, and I just say, excuse me, I thought we were talking about removing a clump of cells. So why is this heartbreaking for the mother? You got to pick the side. You got to pick one. Either we are killing a baby and
That's
that makes the mother sad, or we are removing a clump of cells which is not a human being, you
Yeah,
know?
I think what you just said is exactly this. The problem we have is the world is so black and white, it's like either this or all that. And I feel like I personally believe in Taoism, where they can both be right, they can both be wrong. And I don't know how that would look like politically, but
Mhm. I
philosophically.
mean, well, I won't say they are both right or they are both wrong. Obviously, it's not always black and white, but at the end of the day, uh, we are doing something, and I think that thing is wrong. And I'm not even that religious, but I don't have to be religious to be against murder or something wrong. Compassion? Yes, of course. But again, why do we have compassion? Because somebody is getting rid of a baby. If it was, I don't need to feel compassion for someone who is removing a wisdom tooth or a tonsil, right? So again, this goes to show you the contradiction. Um,
I
and
see
of course,
being consistent in the argument, whatever the
yeah,
argument.
absolutely. They are inconsistent here just when they are um, they are inconsistent when they uh, tell you a man can be a woman, but a baby who is in the mother's womb and has a heartbeat and reacts to the sound and reacts to the voice because that's what they tell you. Isn't it funny in a sad way? Because you go to the clinic to do this, they to listen to the heartbeat of the baby and get the picture, and they do it even in 3D nowadays. If you want it, they say, okay, listen to the heartbeat of the baby. They don't say listen to the heartbeat of the fetus, right? So only if you want it, it's a baby, and if you don't want it, it suddenly is declassified as a clump of cells. You see, she's expecting a baby, she's pregnant with a baby. Nobody says she's pregnant with a fetus, right? And they say, even as a father, that's what they tell you, right? Talk to the baby because after a certain number of weeks, the baby reacts to light. The baby react um, classical music to make them more intelligent or refined. Talk to the baby so that the baby can recognize your voice once she or he is out of the womb. All right? And now that same baby, if you discover that you are up for a promotion and it's financially inconvenient, automatically baby is declassified into clump of cells because my body, my choice. Again, it's so this is what I'm trying to, or partly I did in that routine, right?
I see.
To
Yeah,
dismantle and debunk these arguments like my body is my choice. It's not your body. Do you have, do women have two hearts at certain stages of their life. It's not your body. It's in your body, but it's not your body.
But how about let's take a step back. I think okay, what I'm against is, based on what happened in China with the, population control and, as a therapist, the things I hear as well. And it's very personal and all that. So I feel like what if we just take a step back and be like, maybe the issue is not about pro-choice or pro-life. Maybe the issue is about a government entity is trying to control, individuals. Yeah, like it's about control in all cases.
Uh,
But
well,
maybe
if the
you,
government, if, pardon me,
maybe you are for control. Maybe you're pro-control.
uh, I have mixed feelings about government control because I'm a right winger who is very much in Italian we call it sovranista. So sovereignty, strong borders, strong national identity. But there's also a bit of a libertarianism in me because I just don't think government always understands better than me. Actually, often the government does not. So it depends on the government. And living in the under the government I'm living now, yeah, I'm very much libertarian because the government is crazy. But to get to your point, if the government is not going to defend the most defenseless creatures, then what is that government for? Because again, speaking of inconsistencies, these lefties, these liberals, these woke nut jobs, whatever we want to call them, they are for government in every other aspect of life. The government tells you to get vaccinated. The government tells you to keep a distance because it's COVID. The government tells you to pay tax, and not just to pay tax for your own people, but also we have a duty towards the whole of the world. The government tells you what kind of fuel you need to get in your car. The government tells you not to have a car and get on a bus. So they are for government. Are they for homeschooling? Most of it? No. The government needs to teach us what to think, how to think, right? And then suddenly, when the government says maybe we shouldn't kill this defenseless, voiceless creature, they don't want the government. And again, it's not really about the government because then they want it paid by the government, right? They call it healthcare. That's one of the euphemisms. Again, I joke about this, but it's women's healthcare. And by the way, they want the healthcare, abortion healthcare or non-abortion healthcare, all healthcare to be provided by the government. So the government has to go and collect money at gunpoint from other citizens. That's not libertarian. And then pay for my all sorts of healthcare problems, including abortion, which they call it women's healthcare. So again, this is a contradiction. Do you want government or you don't want government? Because at this point, some people say, okay, you want to do, not myself, but some people say, okay, you want to do abortion, fine, but not with my tax money. They want abortion and gender transition for illegal immigrants. That's what they were doing in America. That was Kamala Harris's position with the taxpayers' money. And of course, USAID and all of these fundings that Trump and Elon Musk stopped, a lot of that went into abortion clinics overseas. So how about that for government intervention?
Hmm. But what about all the shadows that comes from Trump and right wing and
What shadows?
oh, like what's I don't know, the capturing of the immigrants and sending them to foreign countries, separating children with their family in the States at least, and all the racism that comes from that, and
Uh, yeah, well, I mean, there's no such thing as a right to come and live in the US. It's about numbers. And if you flood and Europe shows that if you flood a country beyond a certain number, it's mathematically impossible to not just to maintain the identity, which is very important for me, but also to provide the services and the security. And ironically, that leads to more racism, which is a byproduct of. So, they say they might have good intentions, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So we have a bunch of liberals who don't have to use public transport, who don't have to go to public state-run schools, who don't have to wait for free healthcare because they have everything private. They don't even, they can also say defund the police because they have their personal uh, private security. And then they want to grandstand and virtue signal and all that. But then you see, why did Hispanics uh, vote for Trump in unprecedented numbers? Because if you're a hardworking Mexican, you think, hombre, if everybody from Latin America comes here, well, whose job are they coming for? They're not coming for Hollywood jobs. They're not coming for CEO. They're coming for the jobs of those blacks or Hispanics or immigrants who are already doing mid-level, mid to low-level jobs. It's just mathematics, and this is ironic that the left who fought for, in Europe especially, workers' rights, labor rights, then betrayed their traditional base. No wonder now they want to get immigrants because the workers no longer vote for them. And this is what we had in Italy. This is what we have in the UK. I wouldn't be surprised if it's the case in Spain either. So there's that. And then the specific question of separating children from their parents. Often these are not even children of the same parents because these might be smuggled children because the child has become now a tool of getting into the US. They would be sold into slavery, sex trafficking, a lot of nasty stuff, all just to satisfy the ego and the moral superiority sense of Hollywood and other woke virtue signalers. But then separating kids and parents, I think it started under the term of Clinton. And the question is, if you separate them, they say, wow, you're separating kids from their presumed parents. And if you jail them together, you're putting children in jail. So again, their real agenda, their real wish is do not jail anyone. Just let anyone come in. Don't go after them. If you catch them, give them a piece of paper and ask them to kindly show up in 90 days for the asylum seeking hearing, the so-called catch and release, which Trump abolished, right? So that's the idea. If you put them in jail with parents, you jail the kids. If you separate the kids from the parents and don't put them in jail with adults, you separated the kids. So what do you want?
Okay.
Nothing. No jail.
I, I see your point of view from this angle, and because of time, I want to circle back to the topic with
Sure.
you. So what do you think must happen in Israel, Palestine, Iran, Middle East?
That's a very good question. That's what people say when they need to have some time to think, right? What must happen? Terrorists must be destroyed. There's no point in negotiating or appeasing terrorists. What Israel has done is that, with the help of the US, maybe not to the degree I would have wanted, but they have set back Iran's nuclear ambitions quite significantly. They have dismantled Iran's proxy forces in Lebanon, in Syria, of course, to some extent in Iraq, to a lesser extent in Yemen, because terrorism requires funding, and the funding essentially came from Iran. It also comes from stupid West, because again, we fund them because of the emotional blackmail, but the money instead of going into agriculture, into tourism, into infrastructure, they use it to enrich themselves and also create rockets and missiles and all that. Um, so we need to try to stifle the funding. And then when this whole thing blows over, as I said, if Saudi Arabia as a major Arab state normalizes its ties with Israel, it will have a positive domino effect for other nations to Arab nations to make peace with Israel. Again, the masses will still be anti-Israeli because even now Jordan, Egypt, the ones on the street are not happy with Israel and they will not be happy with Israel for a long time. But you know, you need to start from above. Sadly, you can't start from beyond, from beneath. Because every time that has happened in the Middle East, crazy guys have won the elections, and you've seen that in Iran, in Egypt, in Turkey. That's a sad situation there.
Hmm. So how about all the dying children who, who are stuck in this man-made famine? Yeah, the Hamas is on the, the other side of the coin. But
Mhm.
yeah, how about all those videos that you see online?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fabrication and false accusations and fake news, but essentially, yes, there's no denying that the situation is terrible. Um, but the situation was bad even before, not as bad as now, but we are in the middle of the war. What I say here is what I say about, Trump and Epstein's files. Uh, if if they had anything on Trump, if the Epstein files were true, why didn't they reveal them when they were desperate to put him in jail, right? And again, if there is any real evidence on Israel, they would have. What is? Why would Israelis deliberately bomb a church or kill people who are in the queue waiting for food? What benefit do they get from that? Don't they already have bad PR? This is again in my latest video. They have no interest because the whole world is zoomed on them. They don't need to do that. They stand to gain nothing from that. It's just an unprecedented situation like the division of India, Pakistan, or the British and French mandates of the Arab territories of the Ottoman Empire. It's just no one else is carrying out an urban war on this massive scale against such a vicious enemy who has no qualms about sacrificing its own people. And I know this because I've been raised with this culture. I've seen this culture. It was school syllabus in Iran. The culture of martyrdom. Better to be a martyr and take down maybe an Israeli or an American and go to paradise than be alive and negotiate.